You're listening to Wolf Spirit Radio and Haggy Shack Radio with Barbara Threecrow in Beyond Reality. And you are live.
Thank you, Colleen. Hi, everybody. This is Barbara Threecrow with Beyond Reality. It's June 10th, 2016. I hope you're all out there. The chat room is blank, which feels weird. I was just talking to Colleen about that. I said, boy, how significant that chat room is to know, somebody's out there listening, or just to see the interaction of people. You get an opportunity to do that. And so I'm talking to you. I hope you're all there. And I'm going to be continuing with this really in-depth work here, this reading by George Labono, The Alien Mind, and talking about the non-IFSP aliens and the Greys and the Verdants and various other groups here. Supposedly the non-IFSP aliens say the Greys were infiltrated and driven to desperation. One can easily imagine what the Grey planet was like before it was ruined. Greys didn't get those large, dark, underground eyes through moderation. At present, some Greys' brains are implanted with remotely activated semiconductor chips, which Verdants say are used for communications, security, and navigation. However, given their technological superiority, Verdants could remotely activate such chips for Big Brother-like control and monitoring, should they choose to do so. My personal perspective is that they're working on that right now as I speak. And people are lining up it seems, to get themselves chipped. Some Greys are dependents who don't criticize Verdants openly. The best they can do is resonate weakly given their predicament. At times, Verdants appear to abuse Greys' rights and sensitivities to keep them from telling humans that Verdant intervention might have precipitated the ruin of the once livable Grey planet. Verdants and their associates appear to have manipulated the death of the Grey planet, and Verdants have exploited remnants of the Grey population ever since. It's a lesson in what can happen to a people who allow unchecked infiltration by aliens like the Verdants. Allison Reed, a woman abducted for 4.5 days on one occasion, told David Jacobs that a Grey alien told her that he was the result of genetic manipulation by a higher species. That may have been a reference to the Verdants and their associates. Through arrogance, reliance on mediated, cultivated force and corruption to get what they want, Verdants appear to have isolated themselves from some of their neighbors. And by infiltrating humankind, in order to take advantage of us, and by encouraging crimes of various sorts through remote manipulations and a breeding program, Verdants perpetuate a failure-prone strategy, perhaps a relic of some past Verdant debacle. Now, given their history of bizarre excess, we can expect Verdants to entice human elites with the promise of technological luxuries, while Verdants cause scarcity and destruction at the same time. It's almost like some of these elites, and again, this is my humble opinion, some of these elites have sold their soul to the devil in the guise of the Verdants. So, please remember, Verdants are but one among a vast variety of different populations and are by no means predominant along this side of the Virgo supercluster, although Verdant propaganda pretends otherwise. The stated distinction of being the only colonizer gives Verdants an excess of resources in the short term, but tends to corrupt their lifestyle and decision-making process. As a result, the Verdant model could easily be a long-term failure. Once a larger collective security arrangement forms to restrain Verdants, Verdants won't be able to sustain their overgrown lifestyle. Competing aliens suggest that a collective security convention has already cohered within the galaxy groups of our vicinity. Competing aliens say Verdants have squandered vital resources prematurely and may have retarded Verdant evolution by limiting themselves to the cobbling together of disparate fledgling populations for specious gain. A Verdant told CAF that they slightly compromised their own intelligence by reverting to sexuality. If you recall in my last reading, I was talking about the non-sexual aliens as opposed to the sexual aliens. And apparently the Verdants reverted back to sexuality, and therefore they have compromised their own intelligence by doing this. It's sort of like, I was thinking of this, what is the premise of the issue with sexuality versus non-sexuality beings? And one of them was noted that, that you're driven by this sexuality or this high level of sexual urges. And I guess you would say that's human nature. But then there are excesses which were introduced specifically as an agenda. And so then what happens to, your intelligence? Certainly it removes you from any connectedness to moral or consciousness or connectedness to any spiritual inner standing. At various intervals, Verdants may have been given the boot, literally escorted out of Virgo supercluster neighborhoods either by a larger collective entity or by Virgo megapopulations. Along with other humans, I've repeatedly tested various Verdants for their memory and perspectives on Virgo. Despite a cool outward posture, such Verdants consistently register mild and caution regarding the larger Verdant entity. They also register caution and envy regarding more advanced hyperversal aliens of much longer duration. Assuming that Verdant adventurers may have been humbled by Virgo or other aliens, Verdants could have a grudge motive for expansion here, along Virgo's far edge. Again, from the perspective of a larger non-sexual universal standard, frustrated sexuals like Verdants can be dangerous. Over time, the Verdant entity appears to have turned into a psychotronically policed state, a regime that may be incapable of moderating itself. The Verdant population has grown so large and unwieldy that it's hard for a given Verdant to see the whole, so to speak. Subtly infantile propaganda and artifice prevail, allowing disparate sub-regimes to use the IFSP format as they choose without adequate law enforcement. Worse yet are reports that some Verdants rationalize their corruption in terms of the different social and legal structures on lesser non-Verdant conscript planets. For example, when a large Verdant ship arrives at a place like Earth, the ship is filled with aliens from a variety of IFSP planets. Whose laws prevail under such circumstances? Nobody knows. Since the craft is far from the legitimate domain, no single population aboard is sovereign, hence a tactic kind of lawlessness can arise. Like a bunch of pirates, I guess. Old Verdants talk about a lack of international and interplanetary law on Earth, yet arrange abductions and criminal manipulations that might land a Verdant in jail back on a Verdant planet. Here, in an alien galaxy, however, Verdants feel free to do as they choose among relatively primitive but exotic humans who are a sexual fit for Verdants, by the way. Far from the eyes of the Verdant galaxy's authorities, dangerous impulses go unchecked because no one is there to stop them. Other strains can easily worsen such tendencies. For example, some Verdants may feel regime pressure to use Earth to show that Verdants can sneak past other megapopulations' collective security arrangements. Concerned about Verdant greed and population excess, other galaxies must work to prevent Verdants from repeating what happened in the Greys case. Who in the Milky Way wants a proliferation of hybrid offshoots coupled with planet-killing excess than a Verdant move-in that tends to materialize despite Verdant pretension to do otherwise? Verdants may actually want to militarize us by buzzing defense installations and breeding an obedient client population via abductions, and then worsen other strains on Earth. Why would they do that? First and foremost, to create anti-alien sentiment that would isolate us from friendly neighboring aliens, allowing IFSP aliens to do so as they please here. Second, corrupt militarization would make it easier for the Grey alignment to rescue us from pending ecological and resource crisis. Finally, black budget crimes, murders, launder of illegal monies into semi-private alien-related programs, keep alien issues secret and hide them from competent global consideration. The smaller and more corrupt the human elite who controls alien issues, the easier it is for Verdants to keep those issues secret in order to influence the outcome. Given their technological superiority, Verdants aren't challenged by human defenses, so secrecy allows Verdants to act with near impunity. Grey alignment direct operatives, placed high in the human economy, appear to favor a fast burn strategy for advancing the IFSP agenda on this planet. By aggressively monetarizing the economy in favor of predatory short-term gain, they tilt the economy toward ecological ravages, and disasters in non-industrial nations that depend on predatory lenders like themselves for credit. Such economy is ruinous because it's premised on a complete fiction, invented monetary numbers, in other words, that have nothing to do with safe resource management. It's a dangerously unbalanced equation that leads to failure after failure, worsened living conditions for the human majority, that worsens what's known as the race toward the bottom, when IMF and World Bank restrictions cause nations to default on loans during globalization crisis. Try as they might, many nations cannot repay the loans that force them to raise the price of food and sell off vital assets like power, water, and land. And that drives them deeper into debt and makes life almost intolerable at street level. And in the end, entire nations are forced to sign away the right to plant seeds that their ancestors developed and then are left to beg for credit. They can then be further victimized by the IFSP's direct operatives, one of whom is essentially the American Borgia, while another is a Federal Reserve-related schemer in Europe. In some ways, the IFSP scheme is old and simple-minded. As a result, the planet is driven toward fast burn economics that may seem productive to rich investors, yet are incompetent in terms of resources. Vital rainforests are destroyed, coral reefs killed, and thousands of square miles of ocean around fertilizer-laden river deltas become milky white dead zones where all fish are dying for lack of oxygen. Mass extinctions accelerate, fisheries fail, and the planet's biological resources are written off as roadkill. Meanwhile, such resources are our only security against aggressive predators in the IFSP. Now that terrorism has replaced communism as the prototypical enemy, we see one most fateful irony. There is no terrorist government to fight, so a war of the sort can never be won. Instead, perpetual crisis is declared, resulting in medieval secrecy and rule by corporations, not the people. Under such circumstances, rich nations are afraid to make the changes necessary to secure a diverse, resonant ecology. They're afraid to commit to ecological survival because that's the work of public government, which requires transparency and accountability. Solutions of the sort cannot be implemented by corporations, which are required by SEC regulations to devote themselves to short-term profit. And as a result, the gray alignment scheme leaves our planet ripe for manipulation. They don't want us to organize a healthy, independent alternative. Instead, they want to destabilize humankind through a cascading series of crises that play into the hands of the IFSP, which has already cut secret deals with a small financial mafia here on Earth. One hype-advanced alien said that the IFSP's direct operatives have only 1/60th of the assets that humankind owns. In short, we're being set up to suffer the consequences of a reckless, elite-driven economy that poses the illusion of short-term productiveness, yet is ruinous over the long term. Even the U.S. military has warned that global warming will cause a security nightmare. On the other hand, if we act now to secure our long-term resources, a more healthy kind of economics will follow. When seen from above, the gray alignment's scheme is easy to see, as are the alternatives, which is the human solution. However, a solution of the sort can only be achieved by governments, not short-sighted, self-serving corporations. So we can now see the IFSP strategy in a nutshell. Ratchet up the pressure by fueling the fires of a fast burn economy, manipulate IFSP operatives into high positions, and then worsen human crises and conflicts through sabotage, subterfuge, misdirection, persuasion over great masses of the host populations, and careful manipulations of government policy. As one Verdant told CAF, of course, Verdants portray it all in evolutionary terms. Meanwhile, IFSP operatives push humankind toward a crisis that pits elite actors against elected governments, rich against poor, the technologically advanced against those who still plow fields with oxen. In order to achieve their ends, IFSP operatives have organized the most corrupt human actors against we, the people. So we must learn to sort such individuals out carefully. In later chapters, we will discuss reliable methods on how to do this. Non-IFSP aliens report that Verdant takeover strategies have failed on other planets. One hyper-advanced non-IFSP alien said that at present, the IFSP strategy succeeds in only 1 out of between 4 and 5 interventions. Target planets have opted to remain independent and have sought relations with their neighbors. So, if the story is told publicly, our chances for safe alternative relations improve. It can't be easy to control a far-flung empire like that of Verdance. Complications surely arise when Verdance try to shore up IFSP loyalties internally by preventing scattered, non-Verdant planets in the IFSP from communicating with their neighbors. For example, here on Earth, IFSP aliens like Greys are assigned the busy work of abductions, failure-prone genetic experiments, and other manipulations, in part to simply occupy their time and keep them from straying from the IFSP fold. Old Verdant propaganda routines are probably useful in this regard. However, the more dated and deceptive the propaganda, the worse will be the extinction of sensitivities in Verdants who organize IFSP dirty work here on Earth. In the end, such Verdants become coldly detached and skeptically, morbidly ironic. As a result, human observers hear stilted IFSP propaganda about dangerous primitives and human evils. And Philip Kraft reports that one Verdant derided some populations of planets killed during a Verdant infiltration as little more than ferocious animals. Meanwhile, those planets reportedly held spacefaring peoples who had by then developed high technology. Such reports raise a basic question. Was the original Grey population regarded in similarly dehumanizing terms, or was the situation more complex, involving Verdant expansion motives? Now, cold as it may seem, Verdant schemes that kill planets like the original Grey world, and in parentheses, or Earth, may be seen as smoothing the way for Verdant control of the vicinity. By eliminating or manipulating the elimination of target planet critics, IFSP installations and surrogate populations would be unchallenged. In the end, Verdants expand their energy network. During their worst phases in their home galaxy, Verdants may have tilted their strategy toward planet-killing excess in order to eliminate other populations and to take more star systems for themselves. It's a cold, ruthless strategy that Verdants wouldn't admit to outwardly. However, a bizarrely overgrown population like Verdants is the most likely to have done so. Philip Kraft caught Verdants in lies about their use of weapons, and the tightly controlled lack of background about other IFSP aliens further suggests that Verdants want to hide the ugliest details of their history. Sounds like our history. Along with other humans, I've noted Verdant attempts to cut off interactions between lesser onboard IFSP aliens and ostensibly native Milky Way aliens. Now, worse yet, I've noted a boastful, demeaning quality in Verdant and affiliated aliens, remarks about non-IFSP aliens. For instance, like the Milky Way, make a population of 38 trillion, a kind of Verdant uber allies mindset. Non-IFSP aliens have commented on the subject at intervals. As if to underscore such concerns, highly advanced non-IFSP aliens have pointed out a weakness in Verdant and IFSP aliens' remote sensing, their telepathy and remote viewing, in other words, largely stemming from the Verdant's frame of mind. For reasons noted above, Verdants are prone to a rational kind of directness and immediacy that they're not well aware of. Remember these words, your state of mind or frame of mind, because this is interesting here. It was noted that highly advanced non-IFSP aliens have pointed out a weakness in Verdant aliens' remote sensing. which is telepathy and remote viewing, and this is largely stemming from their frame of mind. Some Verdants see only what fits their colonial viewpoint and discard the rest because it doesn't agree with their propaganda. Meanwhile, non-direct, non-physical remote sensing of a more advanced, non-IFSP sort easily exceeds the overbearing Verdant perspective. It goes through and beyond them via the greater resonance of hyperspace. More advanced aliens keep a distance from Verdant crudeness, hence their extra-dimensional remote sensing and telepathy distinctions. Of course, Verdants know about extra-dimensional physics, yet tend to err due to Verdant forwardness and sexually related detachment. Apparently, Verdants think their neighbors' affairs are conditioned by policies that radiate out from the planet Verdant. Ironically, a typical Verdant remote sensing tends to radiate outward also, while more advanced societies on a much larger collective security scale can sense both inwardly and outwardly, changing perspective nearly instantly and essentially changing body in a nearly non-physical sense as well. Indeed, the challenge for more advanced aliens is to remain humble enough to not be themselves so much, but be the larger, more varied, and sometimes enigmatic, sometimes squalid commonality, a nearly non-physical entity, in other words. More advanced aliens study Verdants from a phenomenal double distance. The Verdant case illustrates the fact that some aliens live in large multiplanetary collectives, while others live independently. Nonetheless, independents find it necessary to accord with larger galaxy-wide ecologies. The critical independent message is to not cede Earth's surroundings to a resource-hungry Verdant empire, to freeze the IFSP out, and beware its attempts to manipulate us into ecological desperation. For Verdants, a lesson to be learned from our preference for independence is that aliens in other galaxy groups are limited by circumstances different from those of the Verdant galaxy. Although our rejection of the IFSP will initially be seen as a Verdant setback, it will eventually be regarded as part of a better ecology along this side of Virgo. It will help Verdants learn to humble their material ambitions. After all, higher orders of mind are increasingly less physical. And that's a very significant point. Higher orders of mind are increasingly less physical, meaning the more you elevate your spirituality, the more you vibrate in that, let's say, a frequency of a spiritual vein or spiritualness, connectedness, you pay less attention or you are less involved in the physical, let's say. Verdants will make last-minute criminal gestures when their attempt to control this tiny sector of the Milky Way is exposed and averted. However, no human has ever harmed a Verdant, not one. Meanwhile, the IFSP intervention has inflicted millions of human casualties. Verdants should acknowledge the harm done, along with their claim to have manipulated changes here. So we now see them mid-stride trying to salvage a failing, propaganda-heavy foreign policy. For Verdants, Earth is analogous to the U.S. intervention in Vietnam, albeit vastly more distant. For those who find my criticism of IFSP abductors sudden, if not harsh, I must note that I don't portray Verdants as evil or unworthy of consideration. Instead, we're free to discuss complex exopolitical strategies. The 21st century must be one of knowledge rather than uninformed belief. In view of the Verdant case, we need to add a different type to Kardashiev's categories. One is the larger cosmic commonality, the generic civilization of which aliens speak. There is a civilization who utilizes negative and alternative cycles of hyperspace in order to reach back and through all intelligent life forms to preserve the peace and secure the most enduring inter-alien ecology. The other civilization is able to exceed technology and can resonate in the very nature of phenomena surrounding us. Presumably, this is more noticeable on a galaxy supercluster scale, yet extends into all surrounding communities as well. In order to secure a peaceful solution to Verdant overgrowth, a more equal supercluster ecology must be taught in the IFSP and in surrounding communities. Humility and forbearance are definitely required. Finally, a greater Type V population is so advanced that it is or was able to hyperdimension from a previous universe cycle into the current one via alternate cycle gravitic resonance that can be affected in light speed ways. This isn't as complex as it sounds, though. Type V populations resemble Type IV populations, but are of longer duration and have a deeper awareness of the continuum. Some can be so advanced that they interdimension with aliens originating among a succession or continuity of previous universe cycles. Nonetheless, a kind of mortality and larger alternate cycle conservations exist therein. And that requires sensitivity to collective considerations of various sorts, because there are limits for every population, irrespective of their duration and their technology. Humans aren't the only aliens who must adapt to the needs of other kind. A more alien-like model of mind. As should be obvious by now, we are beginning to get a basic idea about how aliens think. But what about aliens themselves? How do aliens think about their own minds? During large-scale telepathic interactions, how do they see past their differences? To begin with, aliens are too smart to reduce themselves to a Cartesian point on a graph, a single moment in time, which is a mistake that some humans make. To reduce the physics of mind to fixed coordinate points on a graph would be considered a dangerous oversimplification. Now, aliens argue that flat land physics of the sort is wholly inadequate. When reduced to an anonymous point, singular nothing of sorts, a mind can be manipulated in a childlike terms to suit the needs of whatever corrupt regime is in power at that moment. It can be painted with convenient lies one day, then repainted differently the next. What we need, instead, is a topological model of mind that brings us up to speed with the physics of the 21st century, which is more like that of alien societies. A topological model of mind is better than a linear version because it models mind in terms of volume in time. In other words, extra dimensions that resonate at light speed, instead of the old notion of infinitely small points connected by lines. If Cartesian coordinate points were infinitely small, as they're supposed to be, they would verge on a black hole's singular density, which according to aliens and negative energy dynamics would cause them to fluctuate fractionally and cycle far across the universe in hyperspace. In short, like the minds of the various intelligent aliens we're coming to know, our minds probably don't linger long in a Cartesian flat land. In a topological version, we model the mind in time. The mind in time models the complexity and ordered coursing of a mind over time. For example, If a mind were viewed from aside, it would begin each day by connecting or ordering its knowledge and information, and then, through greater refinement of its observations, would both deepen and expand that connectedness with time. So, over time, it occupies greater mind space or dimension through a finer, ordered integration of thought. Easy, isn't it? Seen from aside, as a mind goes through time, it expands the complexity of its consideration on a daily basis. Reduced mind space occurs when some distortion, like the use of alcohol, the onset of psychological disorder, or some other disruption, reduces a mind's progressively ordered connectedness, its larger context, in other words. Over time, such disruptions can be seen as shrinking the dimension of a mind during the given time period.
Graphic audio.
Hence, the mind will have connected within less space
in your
or dimension
mind
during that part of its wakefulness. Now, a non-sexual alien may think that sexuality itself is a disruption of this sort. A well-adjusted mind suffers less disruption.
Graphic Audio presents Spell Singer
and seeks
by
a greater
Alan Dean
refinement,
Foster.
a finer,
Narrated by
larger
Terence A.
coursing
Goforth. With performances by Gregory
The mind
Lillington,
retraces
Bradley
the
Smith,
development
Chris
of its
Genebach,
thought
Yasmin
and
Twazar,
reanalyzes
Shanta
or
Parasurama,
integrates its
David
observations
Jordan, Andy
with as
Clements,
much of its
James
past and
Donachek,
future
Richard
context
Rowan, Ren
as it
Casey,
can reference.
Jeff Allen, Paul
It either
Ritzman,
picks
Ken
up key
Jackson,
strands of
Michael
early
Glenn,
thought to
Nanette
further
Savard,
correct
Todd
its
Schofield,
development,
Alyssa
or it
Willman,
suffers a
Michael
loss
John
of mind
Casey,
space
Scott
over time. For example, the mind in time can be visualized as a complex, snakingly folded balloon diagram moving from left to right through time, i.e., it's small and fine when you wake at 7 a.m., but further to the right at 9:30 a.m., it's more complex. It expands into awareness, yet folding into itself more tedentiously. Hence, the volume or dimension and complexity of its coursing can be measured as it expands or contracts through time. Alternatively, rather than move from left to right in time, the mind can be modeled as resonating out into large-scale considerations while also reordering inwardly, as aliens do. Now, here's where it gets interesting. The topology of mind in time is formed by thoughts over an entire lifetime. Ideally, the fineness and sensitivities of earlier years are continued into our adulthood. They have definite, measurable parameters. An extinction of emotional sensitivities can cause one to disconnect from a mind's earlier dimensions of childhood affection or sensitivity and thoughtfulness. Extinction of such sensitivities can cut a mind off from the more complex considerations of its past and cause what in effect is a loss of mind space, which is a reduction of the capacity within such sensitivities. Of course, both human and alien adults tend to set such sensitivities aside when they develop specialized thought connections, which require a kind of durability. Yet most humans go full circle, and they end up yearning for the smoother, more delicate kind of openness that children are capable of. Such feelings are gently rekindled when we couple, and may be part of what motivates us to have children in the first place. In our topological model of mind, the largest volume or dimension of mind space integrates a full lifetime's consideration. In one sense, intelligence would be a measure of the perspective and ordered awareness of a mind, yet it's also a measure of the sustained emotional sensitivity of a mind through time. The sensitivity to others that allows our minds to grow in later years. Ironically, emotional crises and seeming failures of concept can sometimes facilitate greater understandings over time because, A topological model of mind is neither mechanistic nor whole number valued. Instead, it's fractionally or alternatively valued. This relates to the larger continuities and helpful alien hints from which this model was derived. So how does all this relate to alien thought? If we better model the nature of mind, we can derive its more advanced possibilities. We should then be able to predict some of the basic snap considerations in an alien's thinking. As we've learned from numerous aliens, a finer, better ordering of thought is multidimensional. It resonates in a larger context. It integrates more information and sentience. Alien minds coexist and can collectively interact with other minds at any given time, which doesn't mean they need to sit in a mute, obedient stillness in between thoughts. In short, our new model helps illustrate the basis for what aliens like Haven aliens call community of mind. Advanced societies in which aliens share thoughts collectively at a much higher rate of speed with vastly increased information capacity. One irony is that they condense or skip over quite a bit of both to both integrate and sort information within a greater pre-existing order. So it may not be a matter of speed, but of finesse within a larger order. Here are some of the ways in which a topological model of mind is helpful for aliens. When disputes arise, aliens can extra dimension the problem. As noted earlier, Haven aliens define an extra dimension as an oscillatory realm that is out of phase with a lesser dimension. And the lesser dimension is pretty much like the one most humans live in. Some easy examples of extra dimension would be your non-personal past or the future, the larger universe, for instance, or gravitic resonance that loops large-scale cosmic phenomena into small-scale quantum phenomena. When disputes between aliens occur over territory or resources, for instance, aliens can expand the entire context to include the active inputs of other aliens or alien societies to include vastly more intelligent considerations. In other words, they can exceed the limitations of any given individual or any single office. It helps to remember that disagreements are common in a diverse universe. For further example, let's say a challenge is raised about the sometimes masculinized competency of a given leader or a given individual. Rather than render the situation in singular terms as if there were no recourse other than those that menace in the short term, concerned individuals need merely remember there are no whole number quantities in this situation, nor can they expect the problem to be resolved if it's distorted by gender. Rather than reduce themselves to isolated whole-numbered actors, they can see through the situation in larger yet finer terms, but fractionally resonating into a larger context, they exceed the given problem. They can also bring in to greater attention. In short, no one need be baited and stuck in an inescapable situation. There are always alternatives. Extra-dimensional solutions appear in a larger yet finer context. This one basic alternative is more important than it may seem. Now, the question here is, how does this relate to us, to humans? For example, if a social stereotype, the fawning anonymous consumer, for instance, is propagated to keep us docile and obedient, and then some human or alien interloper comes along and tries to make us obey by challenging us with images of overly masculinized or sexually objectified female competency, we needn't react or be driven like cattle. We do not have to walk through stereotypical responses, the fight or flight reactions that a concretized, whole-numbered landscape presupposes. Instead, we can examine the problem in larger terms. In other words, we can investigate all of the parties, including aliens, and avoid making destructive low-order decisions. If someone tries to stump you into thinking mono-dimensional concepts in order to crudely manipulate you, a topological model lets you step outside of the setup. You step into a slightly faster than light kind of imaginary time, or I-time, as quantum physicists call it. Like aliens, you inflate your consideration out into larger yet finer expanses. Rather than be challenged individually, aliens inflate out into shared psychotronics or community of mind. They extra dimension a situation and look for inconsistencies in larger yet more finely connected considerations. Keep this word in mind. They extra dimension a situation. I've observed this kind of thinking among aliens on many occasions. In some cases, however, it causes aliens to pretend that they don't make individual errors because they prefer to define themselves collectively, so that could be a conundrum, actually. Not always, but this kind of extra dimensioning is simply a resonance in hyperspace. This kind of extra dimensioning is simply a resonance in hyperspace. Negative energy resonance allows highly complex quantities to be deeply interwoven, sometimes occupying the same place at the same time. Hence, they are extra-dimensional. More importantly, all of this points toward a vastly more intelligent order of being, which we'll get to in a moment. Now, why is this interesting to us? Because this is, to me, very interesting, but it's a way, to me, it's sort of like the future calling us. Advancement on how to develop our extra-dimensional abilities, for instance. How to function on a higher level. How to be more, let's say, sovereign in our own way, to be able to think through, to receive different perspectives instead of having tunnel vision, or freeing ourselves from the rhetoric of mind. We'll say rhetoric of mind is like responses that everybody is imprinted with. The way we relate to each other, the way we communicate with each other is very often sounds like a robotic response. It's not really our own thought. I find that kind of fascinating. We're so imprinted with conversations or how we should respond to people or how we should relate to people or in certain circumstances that it's almost an imprint. It's not really a personal feeling, thought, or personal expression. Just imagine how legal jurisprudence would be if its logic were extra-dimensional. Crimes against humanity would include pollution in favor of the bottom line, in other words, the sale of weapons to legal violators, the abduction of humans by an alien colonizer, and so on. In other words, our laws would be better if they weren't rendered in the concretized singular terms of greed and absolute individuality. Legal definitions based on the topology of alternate cycle commonality would be more precise, not less. Anonymous vehicles like corporations would not be treated as individuals. Well, yes, they should not be treated as individuals. That's gotten us into a lot of trouble. Highly intelligent animals like dolphins would not be killed to get a mercury-laden can of tuna. Yes. A topological model defines low-order singular definitions as invalid, singular definitions as invalid. It places larger social definitions above isolated individual definitions and favors the larger ecology over the greed of any one species. So, a topological model allows for extra-dimensional considerations, a deeper and more intricate reframing of all data and background. The most intelligent considerations can never be exhausted because they're evolving and changing, hopefully, for the better. Indeed, the negative and alternative psychographic gravitic resonance of alien societies suggests that the universe is more than just highly intelligent. Alien societies try to cultivate and are committed to a universe that's hyper-intelligent. A universe deeply, profoundly interwoven with extra dimensions of sentience. Ultimately, this one, most basic dynamic, poses an important question about our own universe. Just how smart is it? How finely and deeply can minds resonate into and across what appear to be multiply extended universe cycles, all of which appear to interdimension in ways that defy outdated 20th century physics? In other words, we are way behind the times, folks. I just want to bring up this video I saw of this boy. He's, at the time, he was maybe doing a TED Talk. Maybe he was 12 or 13. He was diagnosed very early with Asperger's and several other disabilities, and his parents basically were told that he would really never be able to function fully. And so he was put in a class for, I guess you'd say, underdeveloped or challenged children. So, of course, he's talking and he's saying, well, I didn't learn anything there at all because I'm not supposed to be learning because I don't have the capacity to learn. That's what he was told. That's what his parents were told. So he pretty much, the crux of his talk was to stop learning and start thinking, because that's what he did. He wasn't given any tools to learn anything. And so he, in his own way, just made the determination that he was not going to learn anything. Instead, he was going to start thinking and dreaming. And that's what he did. And he started spontaneously drawing on his parents' walls and on their windows. These numbers started coming, and geometric signs and various other things that were quite unusual and strange. His parents didn't know what the heck was going on. Well, turns out this boy is really quite a genius. But even that, he disagreed with that term. It's not a genius. Nobody is a genius, he said. They are just thinkers. So if you stop learning, start thinking and dreaming and creating, he said. Your creativity will flow through if you stop learning. Meaning the way we are taught to learn in school or the education system is really so limited. It basically limits, or I'd just say kills, a child's creativity. And that's pretty much what's going on. So, just how smart is this? A Haven alien told Alec Newald, our studies have shown that those waves that make up everything in the universe at their inception are nothing more than a very intelligent and powerful thought. So how are you going to connect with these waves? They exist. Okay, this is what they're talking about here. There's intelligence out there that is flowing, that is available. But you have to open to it, into that other dimension. So, one might dismiss the notion, were it peculiar to Haven aliens alone, yet the idea is reportedly common among all aliens. To understand why, we must remember that according to quantum physics, at the level of atomic particles and smaller, nothing in the universe is solid. Nothing is concrete. In negative psychogravitic resonance, large-scale cosmic phenomenon are looped into small-scale sub-quantum phenomenon. Why does this occur? Because when the universe expands outward on a cosmic scale, it also pulls inward on a micro scale. Strange as this may seem to humans, it allows for non-local universality of thought, a more advanced kind of mind and existence. To interact as such requires a next level understanding, a more humble regard for the hyper-intelligent potentials of this and any other universe. We need to read and think critically to explore the greater implications of a deeply inhabited universe. So, I'm going to take a little break here, leave off right here, but I want to come back and review this last sentence that I read. Why this is so important for us. We live here in this universe. We're not isolated. We are connected. But the point is, how connected are we, and how connected could we really be? So I'm going to take a short break. I hope, Colleen, if you're there.
Yes, I am here.
Oh, great. And I'll get back to you on the other side.
Alrighty, we are back. You're welcome.
Nothing is concrete. Nothing in the universe is solid. We aren't either, by the way. So, you have, when the universe expands outward on a cosmic scale, it also pulls inward on a micro scale. Strange as this may seem to humans, it allows for non-local universality of thought, a more advanced kind of mind and existence. Now, if we were to interact at such a level, this requires a next level of understanding, which we're moving towards. How do we... Well, I always like to say inner standing. It's a more humble regard for the hyper-intelligent potentials of this and any other universe. The notion that a kind of intelligence can dimension into larger non-living physics may not be so radical after all. For example, if someone were to tell you that weird little event horizons could emerge from a black hole or black holes, and later interact to form networks of non-living quanta that somehow come alive, you might wonder about that. That, however, is our mainstream view of how life evolved on Earth. According to aliens, an advanced understanding can communicate across a multidimensional hyper-intelligent universe. And ironically, one doesn't need to go there in order to do so. Instead, we can essentially be there in a deeper sense. Aliens say we're already immersed in just such a universe, yet, due to human pretensions and archaic concepts, we tend to obscure truths that are right in front of our noses, if not contained within us. By saying this, I'm not trying to steer the discussion in a religious or spiritual direction. I'm simply repeating what a variety of aliens from different places have said regularly and consistently. So it must be important. To sort this all out, it helps to remember that on the one hand, a hyper-intelligent universe is explicit within and among the best, most advanced minds that exist. And on the other hand, certain advanced hyperversal aliens who claim to have originated during a previous universe cycle, warn humans to be aware those who would try to scam us in exactly such terms. They warn that other hyper-advanced aliens, who, by the way, do have physical bodies, might try to confuse humans with short shrift about a disembodied aggregate. In other words, watch out for aliens who might try to foist convenient religious misconcepts on humans. Watch out for colonizers or more advanced hyperversal aliens who may try to assert their individual or population's pretensions are equal to the nature and capabilities of the whole, meaning the entire universe, we've been advised to think critically. Don't just accept whatever you're told. Think it through carefully. Community of mind certainly exists and is premised on non-local qualities. Numerous humans can attest to experience of the sort. Aliens both think and define themselves in terms that are less physical than those of the old 20th century human mind. Nonetheless, use your common sense. Unless you're equal to all the minds of all who ever lived, you merely communicate within a larger continuum. You aren't equal to it. According to our new topological model, non-singular definitions are better and more comprehensive. Because they're defined in terms of universal parameter, they extend far beyond any one single object. They can hyperdimension into more than one place at a given time, like the physics of the negative cycling quantum vacuum around us. In the 19th and 20th century, a basic test for scientific models was that of Occam's razor. It went as follows. If a model or theory is reduced to simplest terms, does it make sense? If Occam's metaphorical razor is used to cut the basic facts away from all else, does this model still hold? In a sense, our new model stands Occam's razor on its head. Now we're able to think in terms of a kind of Occam's hyper. Occam's hyper would cut down on a much deeper level where negative cycling quantum phenomena are both non-local and interdimensioned. When we use Occam's hyper to sort out truth from illusion, we model phenomenon in both large-scale and small-scale terms at the same time. To do so essentially pulls a phenomenon apart and clocks it on both the universal scale and the microscale. We include both clocks, which hyperdimension toward infinity, albeit not infinitely, via hyperspace resonance that ties them together neatly and precisely. This essentially loops subquantum negative energy fluctuations that produce burdens into the inclusive universal passage of time, not merely a local measurement. Negative energy fluctuations exist all around us and cannot be eliminated from our models, as was done during the 20th century. 20th century models relied on local measurements of time drawn in isolation from universal hyperdynamics. 20th century theorists failed to model the movement of energy in space in terms of the expansion of our universe, which is partly premised on and therefore must include negative cycling of the universe into or through black holes, i.e., both clocks resonating in hyperspace. In short, ours is a black hole, white hole model that allows us to sort out observation using a kind of Occam's hyper rather than a razor. Let's recap. A topological model of mind allows for greater recall and creative new alternatives. It permits communities of mind that accommodate all, with certain limitations in the case of offenders. This occurs for one most important reason. Honesty expands and connects through extra dimensions, while corrupted minds tend to collapse within themselves due to singular defects of character. I'm going to repeat that. Honesty expands and connects through extra dimensions, while corrupted minds tend to collapse within themselves due to singular defects of character. The self-imposed limitations of corrupt minds form a kind of event horizon that confines them and, over time, can keep them from distorting more honest others. According to Dr. Sue Arrigo, who says she worked to disrupt a Rockefeller CIA faction involved in crimes against humanity, the Akashic records, simple, precise truth, will become the basis of people's decision-making because so many people have tapped into it. Those records are without bias or flaw. The decisions that come out of union with them have certainty of results. Okay, now think on this. Okay, the Akashic records, which are simple, precise truth, will become the basis of people's decision-making because so many people have tapped into it. Now, this is very important here, what they're saying. So many people have tapped into it, into these Akashic records. Now, this is just an example, the Akashic records, but it could be anything. So many people are tapping into, terrorism. So many people are tapping into the fear-based media. So many people. So this will become the basis of people's decision-making or how they're feeling or what they're thinking, what they're going to choose. It's either positive or negative, but how many people are tapping into it? Either or, it doesn't matter. It's very, very powerful. A topological model allows for finer, more complex interconnectedness of consideration. It allows us the simple space needed to consider inter-alien unknowns, as opposed to old singular notions of mind that tend to degrade into redundant mimicry. A topological model points toward new social definitions and advanced dynamics that allow for the existence of hyper-condensed collective entities, vastly more capable minds that fold meanings back into and through themselves in nearly instantaneous ways so that a greater variety of implications can be conveyed. Hyperversals, is this a new category of aliens called hyperversals? For years now, human contactees have written about a category of extraterrestrials who so greatly exceed aliens that the Greys, for example, like the Greys, that descriptions sometimes fall short. Such aliens have been described as non-physical or hyperdimensional. In Jim Marrs' book Alien Agenda, government-trained remote viewers reported that such aliens are physical but originated during a succession of previous universe cycles, something like a previous universe, but not exactly. Instead, according to such reports, they're all part of the same overall universe. In order for that to be possible, the universal continuum would have to be much older than 13.7 billion years. Cosmologists have toyed with the idea of a recycling universe, yet until articles about negative energy and slightly faster than light physics were published in recent years, a recycling universe was largely considered impossible. All evidence pointed toward one tiny singularity at the beginning of time. From such perspective, there could have been nothing before that first zero moment. The problem with such models was that they were all based on scant knowledge about black holes in the first place. But more recently, cosmologists advanced the notion of a multiverse, which is a succession of interconnected or interdimensioning universes. String theorists suggest that a previous brain, B-R-A-N-E, which is a sheet-like fabric of time, existing in a previous universe could have connected with our brain, B-R-A-N-E, that sheet-like fabric, to cause the current universe to form. U.S. science journals are fairly conservative when speculating about a multiverse, preferring to limit their articles to sketchy notions about a fifth dimension or mathematical models of extra dimensions. Non-U.S. magazines like New Scientist discuss multiversal possibilities more freely. See, Michio Kaku has an article about escaping to another universe. In New Scientist, a British scientist argued that a new model of physics could be premised on a more flexible notion of time alone. And other scientists suggested that during a previous universe cycle, aliens endangered by waning energy conditions could have engineered a new universe into being. He didn't suggest how they might have done so, but theorists like Stephen Hawking have suggested that by manipulating the energy versus negative energy status of a black hole, a kind of white hole could conceivably be created. In short, the old Einstein limit could be exceeded. Now, Hawking theorized that particles or quanta, which are discrete packets of energy, could escape from a black hole if negative energy fluctuations caused by tidal shifts in a black hole were to allow particles to briefly exceed the speed of light and escape that black hole, provided, of course, they slowed down for an equally brief time after escaping the event horizon. For years, Hawking bet colleagues that no information, no recognizable pattern in such quanta could escape a black hole. But then, in 2004, Hawking reversed himself and admitted that he probably lost the bet. New models showed that information contained in what goes into black holes could escape from a black hole, although Hawking suggested that we might not be able to decipher it, given the mainstream assumption that there are no faster-than-light physics, which an assumption that aliens say is incorrect. I think we should pay more attention to what these aliens are saying on these levels. So although theorists like Hawking still debate whether we might be able to see a naked singularity, which is a physically detectable black hole that somehow exceeds its event horizon, the question of whether black holes have a measurable memory has now come into mainstream scientific play. Recognized theorists now discuss the possibility that information can somehow be cycled through black holes, and this has far-reaching implications. For example, as we noted earlier, if toward the end of a given universe cycle, in other words, its habitable stability, aliens were to coordinate their actions universally, they could post electrogravity, magnetogravity craft near all black holes in the universe in order to extend a universe cycle. By sharply tilting the energy versus negative energy balance of all such black holes at the same time, they could cause them to bleed into a white hole, a new universe. However, to wait until the universe is waning might be too dangerous. Alternatively, how much more feasibly, from an advanced alien perspective, they wouldn't have to be near black holes at all. Instead, they could simply orient all of their technology so that the universe cycle is being renewed continually, although it would have discrete event horizons. Now, if such were the case, we might expect to be briefed about universal standards and safeguards, ray negative cycle energy. Remember Tom Bearden's reciprocity discussed in earlier pages? He says that when light converges from opposite directions along each of 3 different axes so that it cancels out, if you gently pulse the energy, it bleeds into electrogravity, and conversely, if electrogravity converges so that it cancels out, it bleeds back into light waves. Believe it or not, that last part may be a crude recipe for creating a new universe, or extending an old one. It would require direct manipulation of negative and alternate cycling phenomena like black holes and larger resonance of hyperspace. By orienting all galaxies' technology so that it converges and cancels out different categories of electrogravity and magnetogravity, a new universe cycle could be effected. Different kinds of electrogravity and related phenomena can probably be modeled and manipulated to sustain discrete structures of space and quanta in an extended universe cycle. Indeed, a more complex ecological convergence and resonance of different, successfully larger categories of electrogravity, magnetogravity, is apparently how advanced aliens both monitor and avoid dangerous effects of such energies. To extend a universe cycle would be a major feat and would have enduring political and ecological implications. It would require a standardized universe-wide network of communications and interactions by hyper-advanced aliens. And if that were occurring all around, you would not want to be left out. All aliens would need to respect that larger ecology. The more finely, the better. Remember, advanced aliens see black holes as alternate cycle phenomena that can connect and shape the universe via a resonance that's slightly faster than light. If we use Tom Berden's equation, the mass inside of a black hole isn't mass in the old sense at all. Instead, the change or fluctuation of time is what it is. Hyper-advanced aliens call it Alt-T. A-L-T-T. So it isn't a question of what is inside of black holes. It is instead a question of how all such phenomena interdimension with their surroundings. Presumably only aliens with advanced electrogravity and alternate cycle technology would be able to communicate widely enough to agree on standards for recycling the universe. And where would they get such technology? Well, it might have been created by aliens who shielded themselves to survive the shock and radiation of supernovas and hypernovas when black holes did combine. It could have been refined by aliens who moved to small icy planets where electrogravity and magnetogravity fields were used to contain and stabilize an atmosphere to allow for habitation. It would have been further refined when aliens modeled how a galaxy's alternate cycle energy affected both a galaxy supercluster and the entire universe. Apparently, magnogravity is another kind of converged canceling out of wave form. Black budget labs in the United States now reportedly produce magnetogravity. Magnetogravity simply converges and cancels out the magnetic fields that curve and bend around the flow of electricity, and this can be modeled neatly. Scientists use the right-hand rule to model how magnetism flows around electrical current. Here's what they mean. If you hold your right hand up, thumb pointing to your nose and fingers closed halfway toward your palm, the thumb points in a direction that electrical current flows, while the curled fingers show the way magnetism always curls around the flow of current. So it's always the right-hand rule. Current flows like the direction of your thumb, while at the same time magnetism, a warping of the space around the current, curves and flows around the current just like your fingers. Now there's a further irony in the fact that conventional electrical current is represented by an arrow that flows from the positive terminal of a circuit toward the negative terminal, as though the positive charges flow in that direction. Meanwhile, what we call real current is the flow of electrons that go in the opposite direction. Real current flows from a negatively charged electron's position in one atom to the positively charged empty hole in another atom. This subtle irony becomes important in superconductors and the weirdness of negative energy relationships. Rather than being a simple linear flow, we see a more complex multiple flow and convergence of electrons, empty holes where electrons once were, and a subtle bending of space around the current, which is what we call magnetism. To extend a universe cycle would be a major achievement but would require all advanced hyperversal aliens to agree on certain basic conventions. Peaceful coordination on such a scale doesn't just happen by itself. It would have to be accomplished. It would require humility, a shared vision of all participating aliens in the whole of the universe. Such aliens would likely reduce or moderate their numbers in order to continue into an extended universe cycle. Greed and violence would have to be overcome, but disagreements would naturally continue. So what would be the main theme among such beings? Once again, a shared ecology, not a piggish scramble for real estate. Living in an already inhabited hyper-advanced universe, humans who think that greed is the best way to get ahead of the alien pack would be seen as weird, undesirable primitives. According to numerous aliens reports, larger precedent has already been set. Regimes of violent classist greed are less able to maintain a survivable ecology. Entire planets die at intervals. In some cases, they are manipulated towards such ends. Those who suspect that this discussion about hyper-advanced aliens is headed in a certain direction are correct. On May 6, 2004, an apprehensive population of hyper-advanced aliens called hyperversals began explicit contact here on Earth in no uncertain terms by stating that yes, they did originate during a previous universe cycle. As far as I know, it was the first time such aliens had gone semi-public in announcing their existence. Human officials had previously hinted at such beings in one rumored French government report and a U.S. government report that Sergeant Clifford Stone saw while on active duty. The French government has been less retarded than the U.S. government in publishing its findings about aliens. The Cometa, a report prepared for the French Defense Ministry, and the year 2004 report UFOs, The Evidence, by Dr. Jean-Jacques Velasco, head of SERPA, was a subunit of the French equivalent of NASA. Years earlier, an unusually advanced non-IFSP alien had almost casually remarked, "Here, the Verdants are seen as efficient compilers of data that more advanced aliens can later draw on." This was stated in passing, but was starkly different in character from previous aliens' remarks. At the same time, we humans were trying to put what we were seeing into larger coherent perspective, and I suspected that something was going on that far exceeded Verdance. There had been other remarks of the sort, statements that coolly and confidently put the Verdants in their place, as though the aliens making the statements had more advanced, large-scale insights of some sort. For example, one day, several years ago, while I lay awake in bed, the more advanced aliens demonstrated their capabilities by seeming to change both the nature and the order of time, its very structure, right before me as I lie there. Eyes were closed, and I was watching attentively. Years later, another hyper-advanced alien explained that they had simply looped time in more complex ways. For years prior to this event, I had interacted with aliens closer on the evolutionary scale to humans, so I wasn't one to be unduly impressed by basic off-world capabilities. But the looped time incident was vivid and deliberate, far beyond the capacity of Gray's IFSP aliens, a fact that Gray IFSP aliens seemed to acknowledge later, and it was done to make a statement of some sort. It took the lid off of the Verdant-imposed ceiling over humankind. Apparently, there were more advanced others of some sort. Well, that's good news. Back to the morning of May 6, 2004. Years afterward, I awoke after experiencing sleep interruption done by IFSP-related aliens when someone like me stands out for criticizing their activities. The night before, I'd been involved in an argument during which, as an aside, I firmly but reluctantly warned Greys that humans have a right to defend against the type of scheme that appears to have ruined the original Grey planet and furthered Verdant predations there. Such back-and-forth mind communications can be testy, to say the least. Being a critic of Verdant provocations, I felt it necessary to state a basic truth about the human predicament. For years, while I investigated the manipulated conflict scheme that alien sources say Verdants imposed on the original Grey planet, which led to its ruin, I had argued that Verdants might have wronged the Greys. I'm seen as unusual for having done so. More noteworthy, of course, are the efforts of alien individuals who go out of their way to report on this subject. My investigations into Verdant doings are more explicit than those of most humans. In part, this stems from ongoing help and information offered by sympathetic non-IFSP aliens, some of which is noted in previous chapters. Again, on the night of May 5th, 2004, I'd warned Greys that humans could logically be expected to use lethal force to ward off abductors working a takeover and possible planet-killing scheme here. It was the first time I'd spoken so bluntly, and I discerned that various aliens attending to the exchange felt that a critical threshold had been reached. Little did I know who would respond to me later. Early the next morning, I was awoken and critiqued, the usual kind of communicated exchange, by a hyper-advanced alien I'd previously criticized for acting like the boy in the bubble when offering comments from highly advanced yet idealized remove from the Verdant's scheme here. The hyper-advanced alien was clearly more evolved than a Verdant, yet seemed to loft any argument about Verdants into cryptic, large-scale terms, attributing a seemingly round quality to such considerations. Given Verdant violations here on Earth, I'd expected more trenchant legal distinctions, at least some acknowledgement that humans have valid grievances. Then, quite unexpectedly, the given alien admitted that his population had evolved before what humans call the Big Bang. He also hinted that the current universe cycle had been engineered or somehow extended. It was a semi-public admission that life had existed in great numbers during an earlier phase of a longer universe cycle. In short, if the report is correct, the universe is much older than a mere 13.7 billion years. And then in order to demonstrate that the story was told in earnest, the alien opened up the entire context of previous related advanced demonstrations, noting that they were the work of his kind. The experience had the same depth, a different feel from the coarser, more crudely framed Verdant doings. Later that day, someone in the hyper-advanced, a hyperversal aliens group, showed a graphic visual of how it was for them to sit in a contained hyper-environment as the universe cycle was extended long ago. In this visual, a crowd of aliens stood within a large contained space. Containing them overhead was a large orb-shaped magnetogravity-affected membrane at a time when the old universe was extended into a new cycle. The membrane may have utilized alternative fluctuations that go deeper than electrogravity and magnetogravity, and the subject was treated with deep gravity, a most somber message. Those who witnessed it were awed. We've never imagined anything like it. The best approximation would be to imagine that you live on a small planet on a very large rounded artificial craft at the exact moment when a big supernova, or worse yet, a hypernova occurs, caused by merging black holes, and this would kill everyone were they not shielded. In the Hyperversal Aliens graphic, a momentous, apprehensive pause ensued as they watched the dome above them rush with a muted red-orange color, some vast cataclysmic event described as the extension of a universe cycle. They said that it resembled the contained weathering of a supernova hypernova, and it appeared to involve fades of the given aliens' bodies, like those seen by Alec Newald on a Haven alien craft when it traveled at faster than light speeds. Tense, eerie quiet ensued, a collective pause of an extraordinary sort as the moments passed. Of course, humans found it profound and deep with implications. It was a day that one remembers for life, a marker that could redefine a number of basic assumptions. Nonetheless, we were on the watch for fawning, simplistic tendencies, the inability of some humans to maintain their critical acumen beyond such a threshold. Although it was a profound moment in human-alien interactions, I later walked the Hyperversal, who initiated the contact through a series of questions. Mindful of the context in which the given alien had initiated explicit, open contact as a Hyperversal, not using that word, of course, at a moment surrounding remarks about human defense against the Verdant IFSP scheme, I mentioned the above-noted human direct operatives. One was a Swiss-French arms manufacturer and former mutual funds owner of the U.S., and other a leading Jewish financier in Europe, who reportedly further the IFSP scheme here. The Hyperversal alien suggested that I shouldn't verge on the notion of violence toward Greys. Apparently a non-sexual of a seemingly gentle sort, he suggested that the Grey story was a complicated one that merited deeper, moderated reserve. And I said I hadn't advocated harming the Greys, but had argued otherwise for years, mindful of the Verdant-related debacle that killed the Greys' home planet, which caused the Greys to lose the only mature, naturally evolved biome that may ever be allowed them. And due to the disaster, some Greys are perpetual guest dependents tasked by the Verdants. The hyper-advanced alien who initiated contact is part of a population I tentatively referred to as the X for negative energy users, X for hyperversals, and for the fact that they don't merely work via a positive-negative energy scheme, but appear to have refined a third, more complicated dynamic. The ex-alien spokesperson replied that a human collective premise will arrive at some vaguely gray-like status over time, irrespective of its short-term human choices. And I countered that X fails to make basic legal distinctions, that X's cohort population isn't actively engaged here, nor is X's cohort doing basic day-to-day physical duty here either. One of X's related associates, using a staged Verdant-like filter, countered that I, myself, am not yet effective in correcting certain problems here, meaning I'm not effective in correcting human violence and inequality. It appeared to be a hint about X's involvement with Verdants. But I countered that further time is necessary to propagate and evolve a more advanced planetary basis to correct these problems. I said Verdants propagate conflict, essentially enslaving Greys through lies, deception, and destruction that allows a partly corrupt overgrown population of sexuals, meaning the Verdants, to lead non-sexuals, the Greys, which could be dangerous, and X replied glibly and without details, saying that humans would arrive at some collective premise anyway, perhaps rationalizing that violently schemed Verdant ends justified the means. At this juncture, other aliens, some of an advanced hyperversal character, offered critiques of X. It was greatly helpful in that we humans were over our heads in a subject about which we knew very little. I tentatively refer to the hyperversals who criticize X as X's for a possible extra integer or character. The X's appeared to be another group or a counterposed hyperversal faction either equal to or more advanced than X. Again, one must remember that during the waning phase of a previous universe cycle, that there would have been many advanced aliens of different origins from different systems. Some would now be more independent-minded, more rigorous in their thinking than others from collectives that might at times favor the generalizations of a given community. X said that X's group had directed Verdants to our location in the Milky Way, effectively helping Verdants initiate activities here on Earth. X also noted that X's group deliberately informs Verdants of the location of some newly technological planets like our own. Hence, X's group apparently rationalizes that some planets will be ruined, which could conceivably accommodate X's cohorts. One or more of the X's added that some of the X's associates do so as a deliberate strategy. Now, at this juncture, X was listening attentively and had ample opportunity to correct X if this were untrue, but he didn't, which may be tacit admission that the allegation was actually correct. In alien community of mind communications, honesty isn't merely optional. It is required, because dishonesty is easily detectable and lacks coherence. So dishonesty has a failed, more seemingly physical anatomical character. Honesty is more intelligent because it connects on a larger, finer scale through shared scientific transparency, even if at times honesty may feel uncomfortable. However, when an alien community of mind like the one that includes X interacts with an exploitative population like Verdants, and when that combination interacts with humans, lies, deception, and low-order propaganda can creep into the aliens' behavior. They may try to rationalize it in terms of information control, but it shows that some advanced alien communities have very real problems. As was later pointed out by one of the X's, hyperversals like X are clearly physical and have water-based bodies. X himself was shown to have whitish-gray skin and a large, fairly rounded head. They are bipedal, with 2 eyes and a body that's sturdier than a gray. He appears to be taller than a gray. His elbow and knee joints are notably rounded, more circular and sturdy than are those of a gray. However, the message had an overly deliberate, prototypical feel to it. One fleeting quote asserted that hyperversals of the sort can live 11 million years, which contrasts with the mere 20,000 years that Verdants reportedly live. One hyperversal stated that hyperversals like X had to change, in part, to a lighter, elemental composition in order to ride out and survive into an extended universal cycle. Whether this involved selectively using electrogravity to simply remove heavy elements or a more complex genetic strategy, I really can't say. It may simply refer to how mass is suspended in faster-than-light travel. X and the X's both defer to and appear to interact with a host of other hyperversal aliens. Indeed, some of the other hyperversals are so advanced that they challenge one's notion of possibilities. For example, one or more of them later demonstrated an ability to pose what would happen or would have happened were a human, myself in this case, to have chosen unwisely, unecologically at a given moment. In an awesome display, the hyperversal drew upon a variety of time horizons to quickly show various outcomes that would happen to me were a variety of bad choices to be made. The strange part of the demonstration was that it appeared to bend time around to reach both back and forward in time, in order to do so across a multiplicity of event horizons. No verdant had demonstrated such a capability to my knowledge. Most importantly, the other more advanced than X populations appear to be more capable than X and are more finely deeply integrated into the continuum. Some of their existence and doings appear to dimensions right through us and our surroundings because extra universe cycles appear to either resonate across and through ours via different orientations in time or coexist with us with much larger implications. Perhaps some readers have witnessed manifestations of hyperversal consciousness communicating about right and wrong, good ecology and analysis versus bad. The reason why readers may have witnessed such is that hyperversals can fatally watch and see through the activities of recently evolved aliens. They can do so without leaving much trace. Their capabilities suggest that the old notion of physical limits is a most specious pretension. We all interdimension, apparently. Hence, some of our old 20th century conventions are inadequate. So yes, scientists are at last saying that we are interdimensional beings as humans, and I believe that we are. Again, to return to that first May 6, 2004 interaction with hyperversals, mindful of my concerns about recent IFSP manipulations in our history, exposed that Presidents Kennedy and Johnson were simply, in context of the 1965 Indonesia genocide and the U.S. assassinations, that they were simply tools of elitist indifference, a failed violent strategy. I countered that Verdant-related Bitterman DuPonts were among the worst of same. To begin with, this is widely specifically known off-world, hence I wasn't dropping a new idea into the mix. Later, X allowed that Verdants could be wrong in their strategy, of course. At the time, I was looking for diversity of origin and outlook among X's group after I'd noted various other hyperversals' critiques, which was encouraging. Hyper-advanced aliens tend to speak to us as a group. X argued that Greys played a vital role in introducing humans to advanced concepts, collective considerations, and genetic non-sexual ideas. I countered that our non-destructive, non-planet-killing neighbors may do that better without mobbing up the situation in self-interested, colonial fashion. I argued that our best strategy is to reduce population and work toward a better ecology that Verdants exemplify. I argued the concept of basic universal laws common to all societies, allowing for evolution and regeneration in some cases. And in reply, X tended toward generality and blandly remarked that we would ultimately arrive at collective reckonings anyway. We, meaning us humans, would ultimately arrive at collective reckonings. X said we don't need to kill Greys, for whom X associates have some liabilities, and that instead we can prevail through informed awareness. 2 or more X's critiqued X who I accused of failing to make basic distinctions about Verdant mass crimes against humans. And one sharply worded X critique of X fleshed out X's reasonings and said that if we, a larger non-Verdant convention, were to correct Verdance and cohere on a larger scale, that we would be more capable because we would potentially be able to return to an extended universe cycle. At the time X was resonating through and elucidating the assumptions on this argument, this was an important point. X was thus exposed as having assumed that the Verdant scheme would foul our collective large-scale convention and disallowing our large-scale capability, and also hampering us from enduring into an extended universal cycle. It also suggested a possible relationship between these Verdants. Wary of any X assumption that might condemn humans to failure, I followed up on the subject at intervals. Later, one alien associated with X asked Ray the Verdance, "Do you know what they later become?" Hinting that the IFSP may be tasked with extended universe cycle duties after Verdants have evolved considerably. Now, this kind of thinking assumes de facto that megapopulations, like some hyperversals, have some common characteristics. Basic issues surrounding megapopulations will be discussed in a later chapter. Other hyperversals attending to the exchange noted that by using a hybrid intermediary who seems to have some human characteristics, that X had previously argued that any use of electrogravity and magnetogravity here by recently evolved aliens took away from X's associates' potential duration, dimming the minds' lifetimes of their progeny by shortening the duration of their calculated cycle. The individual was trying to argue that excess use of electrogravity, magnetogravity, would endanger the sensitivities of yet more advanced hyperversals. Okay. I'm going to have to close at this stage. There's a few minutes before top of the hour, and I know Joyce Wheeler's coming up with It's Your Life. It's always great to hear what Joyce brings to the show, and I want to thank Colleen, Haggie's Shack, and Wolf Spirit Radio, and all you listeners. I hope you're enjoying this. I know in some cases it's pretty deep, but I think it's very important information. And it helps us to think out of the box. That's what we're doing, thinking out of the box. Let's get out of the box. Okay. Well, thanks for tuning in to Beyond Reality, and I will see you all next Friday. Have a beautiful day, night, and morning. Bye.